Hello everybody, welcome back to the Marko Book Club. It's summer and it's time for a summer read, and to that end I am recommending Barbarian Days by William Finnegan. So it's been a little while since I've updated the book club. I apologize for that. There have been a lot of things happening behind the scenes. Number one, Alex and I have worked on some really ambitious projects for my main channel, Vagabrothers. There's 5 videos coming out. They're all super high quality. I also have been working on some personal projects. First and foremost, I wrote a screenplay. I tried to come up with my own idea for a TV show, and I pitched the idea for a TV show, so I had to write a pilot and also what's known as a story bible, which is like the whole backstory, the characters, and how you see the season evolving and multiple seasons in the future. So that took up a lot of time. Didn't really get to update the book club in those months. I also just completed a rebranding of my channel, which I'm going to be launching very soon, if not by the time the video is live. And I've also been working on putting together a proposal for a memoir. So on that note, I am recommending this book because it is one of the better memoirs I've read in a very long time. So you might be wondering, what's the difference between a memoir and an autobiography? A memoir is less of a story of your entire life. It can be just a section of your life. It's like a mixture between biography and journalism. Memory is, very malleable, and so in something like a memoir, you have a little bit more freedom than you do to tell a story like a journalist would. And in this case, William Finnegan is a journalist. He's a war journalist, actually, and he's an editor at the New Yorker magazine, as well as other places. He's reported from South Africa, Mozambique, and other conflict zones around the world. However, he's also a surfer, and I should say he's a surfer first and foremost. And this book was recommended to me by a lot of people. My brother Alex actually gave me this physical copy. He's a huge surfer. He loves surfing. And when I first got it, I was like, okay, a book about surfing. Like, I'm from San Diego. I surf. Everybody grew up surfing there. But I've never really been a hardcore surfer. And the idea of a book that was about surfing, I thought would be a little bit, boring. Not really my style. However, this book is totally different. So if you don't surf, if you're worried about that, I would say don't worry. The book is great and you will love it. What I've learned in trying to make my own travel memoir is that travel books these days, to get published, they can't just be a collection of travel stories. You have to do what's called double duty. You have to do a story about your travels and then also another narrative coming through. In this case, surfing provides kind of a focus. It's a constant theme that comes throughout the book, and it's his vehicle for exploring the world. So William Finnegan grew up in the 1950s and 60s in Southern California. And then his dad moved to Hawaii when he was like 10 years old. And he grew up in the mid-60s in Hawaii. And he talks a lot about his youth growing up and how, surfing was a little bit of a hobby when he was a young kid. Through the years, it became more and more of his lifestyle, and it became more of a path. And that's actually where you get the name of the book, where he says that after surfing, after being in Hawaii, surfing comes from Hawaii, and he's telling the story of how it came from the ancient Hawaiian kings and how it was actually almost prohibited by the Christian missionaries who came to Hawaii, not least among them. For a kid who kind of surfed from the valley in Los Angeles, not next to the ocean, moving to Hawaii was paradise. And he also found a way to integrate himself with the local community. Being a white kid in Hawaii, he was called a haole, a mainlander, an outsider. And he basically got caught up in gangs, and the 60s started happening. So he's in the middle of Hawaii, the hippie generation starts arriving, surfing goes through a revolution from longboards to shortboards. And he tells crazy stories such as, one day being high on acid and then realizing that the surfing, it's huge. And being a good surfer, he can't help but paddle out, but he's also tripping balls on acid. So he ends up paddling out with a head full of drugs and just still going for it and getting really, really good waves. And people are looking at him from the beach like, oh my God, this guy is killing it. What's happening? Anyways, the book gets its name from this one section here, the name Barbarian Days from this section here. He's talking about surfing and how it was developing for him. And he said that surfing was still something that one did, that I did with friends, but the club thing, the organized sports part, was fading fast. I no longer dreamed about winning contests, as I had dreamed about pitching for the Dodgers. The newly emerging ideal was solitude, purity, perfect waves, far from civilization. Robin Crusoe, endless summer. This was a track that led away from citizenship in the ancient sense of the word, towards a scratched out frontier where we could live as latter-day barbarians. So that's where the Barbarian Days comes from. Just to kind of skip around, after grad school, he and a friend decide to go on a surf odyssey. There's no other way to say it. They leave California, they go back to Hawaii, and from Hawaii they go across the South Pacific with just these gigantic shipping maps that show where the reefs are around these different islands, these small atolls. Surfing was just taking off around the world. It had started in Hawaii, it went to California, and it was having an explosion. It was happening in Australia, it was starting up in Europe, but the South Pacific, which today holds some of the best waves in the world, was still relatively unexplored. And so he and his friend started going to all these different atolls looking for undiscovered breaks. So in that sense, he is a pure explorer, and surfers are really great explorers. Like, they're always looking just around the corner to find an undiscovered break, and when they find them, they like to keep them secret. So along the way, he's going from island to island, and they're just really vagabonding and just like hitchhiking. One night they were like drinking in a bar, and an Australian purser for a tanker ship said, "Hey, we're going this way," and they hopped on the boat at midnight drunk. That's how they were getting around the South Pacific, and they took years to do this. It was a very long trip. But eventually, one day, they're sitting at a bar and they meet this girl, and she's drinking, she's American, and she lets it slip that she and her boyfriend and his friends had been sailing on a boat, and they'd anchored off some remote island so the boys could go surfing. And instantly they're like, remote island, where is it? Can you show us your boyfriend? So she takes them back to the ship, and the boyfriend's like, oh God, she blew it. My girlfriend just told the news. These guys were really non-committal about where it was, and they were giving them kind of misinformation. But eventually, William Finnegan and his friend figure out from the charts where the island must be. They get these locals to take them out to this island on a wooden ship, and they have food for a week. And the idea is that they're going to camp out there, and there's literally no people living on the island. They have their own food, and they're out there by themselves. And when they run out of food, they're supposed to make a giant bonfire, and then the locals will come back and get them. The place that they discovered is Tavarua, which today is, a place that holds world surfing contests. It's a huge spot, and they had it to themselves. And this is kind of what goes back to that idea of the Barbarian Days and this search for purity, and surfing being less of a hobby and more of a path. It's really, it's almost like he talks about this with the Zen-like quality of pursuing this ideal. And in Tavarua, he talks about the idea that the surfers have this sort of Platonic ideal, this ideal that you have perfection, and you never really get there, but you really try to get towards it. And in Tavarua, he says he pretty much found it. And so that is a really interesting section, especially how the story evolves as he moves around. He goes to Australia, he moves back to California, he lives in San Francisco, he becomes more of a formal journalist. And in doing so, he talks about how the surf magazines cover these places. Now, surf magazines have a really dedicated way of talking about, usually they obscure the exact location. They might say it's in Southwest Australia or something, but they don't tell you where it is. And this is kind of part of the rule, the unspoken rule of surfing. But in this case, Tavarua becomes a private resort. It's owned by some Americans who bought it out, and they limit the numbers of people who could be there. So it's still small and not crowded, but you have to pay thousands of dollars to be there for a week. Anyways, like I said, the book is not just about surfing. It's about a lot of things. It goes through the South Pacific, it goes to Australia, it goes back to California, it goes to South Africa during apartheid, where he becomes a teacher, he works in the townships, he meets a local girl, he explores politics, he gets to write his first book, which is about apartheid, which later sets him up to become a war journalist in places like Mozambique. He develops as a writer, and he's also talking about his travels. I mean, he goes through the Asia Trail, what you might call today the Banana Pancake Trail, which is what used to be hippies coming overland from Europe through places like Afghanistan, all the way on to Asia and India. And so he's kind of commenting on backpacker culture, surfer culture, and how the two intersect in places like Sumatra in Indonesia. He also then, he writes the memoir. It goes from his early childhood all the way up to as he becomes a full-time writer and a husband and a father, and he's living in New York City, and he's still surfing out in Montauk and then going out to Madeira off of Portugal. And a lot of the book takes place in Madeira, which is kind of the point where he starts becoming more retrospective and looking back on his life, looking back on his career as a war journalist, and his evolution as a surfer. And they get into some really big waves. If you don't surf, you might not know, but Portugal, because it's on the end of Europe, gets gigantic big wave surfing. And Madeira, because it's an island that's technically off of Africa, gets just like gigantic ocean swells. So there's really crazy stories about them surfing out there in these huge waves that makes him kind of wonder, why is he doing this? And he's getting older, and his life is threatened by some of these days where he paddles out. It's a beautiful book. It's really beautiful. I think it's a great book to recommend for summer because it's not too heavy. It's a light read. It's entertaining. Like I said, all the hippie generation stuff is crazy. All of his stories of growing up in the 60s in Hawaii and California are awesome. The surf exploration, the discovery of these places as some of the first like Westerners who were not colonialists or missionaries going out to these places and interacting with locals to find the best surf. That's really priceless. And I think, from my perspective, looking at good examples of memoir, I really like it because the book that I'm conceiving right now, I want to create a collection of travel stories that spans, 20, 30 years. In this book, he does even more than that. It spans about 50 years. So I'm reading it as a writer and looking at how beautifully he paces the book, how he selects just the right sections and leaves out other stuff. I think that's a really important thing to do when you're a writer. And, just his ability to weave together politics and journalism with his own personal experiences. He also has a lot of perspective. He's writing this in his 60s, and he's talking about being 18 years old, which is good. It's good to look back on your life and see how you've evolved as a person. So I highly recommend this book. Give me some comments. Let me know what you think about it. Check it out. It's a great book for the beach. Like I said, it's a pretty fast read. The hardcover weighs in at 400 pages, 450 pages, but it reads really fast. It's got a good pace, and it's never boring. So I hope that you guys enjoy this. I'm going to be doing some more book reviews. I've got some fresh books in. I am really trying to mix it up a bit more. I've also redesigned this space here, so I'll be publishing a video on how I did my filming office and my house makeover with my friend Danny, and I'll also be answering some questions about the memoir that I'm writing right now. I took some questions on Instagram. I'll answer those in an upcoming video. So I've decided on a motto for this book club as well. I'm going to say, travel widely, think deeply, and I will see you soon. So enjoy the book, take photos of it, and post it on Instagram. Tag it with the hashtag Marko Book Club. And I will see you guys soon. Happy reading. Peace.